Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny.
Third time's the charm.
Well, this week I am back to the smooth jazz voice of the normal podcast and away from the shouty Robin Williams Good Morning Vietnam voice.
If this all sounds a bit strained, it's because this is the third time doing this intro.
Yeah, we had the first time Callum's audio wasn't recording, and then the second time I missed the word film out of the podcast, mainly because a cable got knocked and I was stressing out about the noise the cable was making, and then
But it kind of garbled together. It was that Untitled podcast.
Yeah, we kind of all went into one.
But it's all water under the bridge or over the hill or wherever the hell the water goes.
Now we are back to top quality entertainment with the sound of seagulls in the background.
Also the first time in the studio, I guess, for a few weeks because of illness and various other bits of reasons why we couldn't be recording it together. So now we're back to our natural charming selves.
Back in action. Indeed. So, once we've done our intro, there's something we normally do every week, Callum. And that...
Oh yeah, what would that be?
...is to discuss movies. But before we discuss movies... we like to discuss how people can interact with us.
We should
in the
call
real
this
world.
the unscripted film podcast.
It is incredibly unscripted. And that's what people listen to. They want our flow. No one wants a script. It'd be very boring.
It would be very static.
But anyway, so Callum, how can people interact with us?
Well, if you get thee over to Facebook and Instagram, it's Untitled Film Podcast, one word. And just to kill this joke, we're not on Twitter, or at least not properly. We've got one tweet from like 6 months ago and we didn't go back. And it's not even called Untitled Film Podcast over there. So at the moment, only Facebook and Instagram. And we're back to doing sort of fun bits and pieces on there because for a while we were just posting the new episodes, but we're back to asking questions.
And you asked one this week, I believe,
I did indeed. In celebration of the film that we reviewed last week, The Greatest Beer Run Ever, we posted a question about beer moments in films. So I posted a picture from The World's End, but you could have also gone for something like Ice Cold and Alex if you wanted something classic, or various other bits of drunken debauchery in films. And a friend of the podcast, Dog Brain Videos, sent us his answer. And it's any American Pie film, especially when they have those red Solo cups. I remember how popular those cups became in the UK about 10 years ago when they started suddenly selling them in Tesco. Everybody became a Stiffmeister wannabe. And
Tesco, for Americans out there, is like Walmart.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And we didn't jump on the sort of red Solo cup thing for the longest time. And then suddenly they just sort of sprang up out of nowhere.
They're in Poundland now, which is our version of Dollar Tree as well. So, yeah, they're everywhere.
And it brings up a good point about American Pie. That is a film that probably was one of the first kind of that. I can think of the moment where the nasty bodily fluid goes in the cup. It's one of the big first gross out moments, and that sort of heralded it's sort of the statement of the film. Like, this is the humor from this point on. You're going to like it or you're going to not.
But those red Solo cups were all over like teen movies and that kind of thing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And in the UK, they weren't a thing. So everyone was like, oh my God, I could be in America with a red cup. And
yeah, you just need a red cup, Jason Biggs, and Sum 41 on the soundtrack. And yep.
Or maybe that one song that, what's the song called? The one with the somebody once told me the world was good. The Smash Mouth.
Yeah.
That one song they did that people know, that is in every movie from that period of time, from Shrek to Rat Race to every teen movie going.
Yeah, it was the big hit.
Come, my lady, come, my lady.
Oh,
you're
yes.
my butterfly, sugar, lady.
I've forgotten what their name
you're
is.
my pretty, but them as well. Both
yes.
one-hit wonders that were on every kind of early 2000s soundtrack ever for a teen movie.
Yes, and that's a very good beer moment, so thank you for sending that in.
And Callum, what was your favourite beer moment from a film?
The one that kind of the classic one, I already mentioned it, is the movie Ice Cold and Alex. I don't watch a lot of old movies, but back in the day when I used to go to a local theatre and they set up a sort of cinema that would play a kind of Blu-ray onto a projector every so often, like cinema in the broadest possible terms. One of the movies they played was Ice Cold and Alex. Of course, it's about those soldiers that go across the desert and they're just thinking about this one beer that they're going to have at the end of the journey. They're looking forward to this beer, and it's sort of a double meaning. Ice Cold and Alex, they're either going to die, be ice cold, or they're waiting for this ice cold beer, and it is a very satisfying moment. But Johnny, what do you have?
Mine is very different.
Very different.
Mine, I just always remember in Social Network, there's that scene where they're having a house party in the kind of like frat housey thing they've set up down in California. And Sean Parker / Justin Timberlake turns up with his girlfriend, and Mark Zuckerberg's character is just Mark Zuckerberg. Sorry, / Jesse Eisenberg's character is just like, beer, yeah, and throws one to Sean Parker, grabs it, opens it, and then he throws one to his girlfriend, and she just panics. And then they've done a very cool moment where they've thrown it directly at the camera and it smashes on the camera. And I think always thought that looks quite cool.
Yeah, that is a cool moment.
Cool effect. But yeah, that's mine. Excellent. So that is the socials. Get interacting with us. We like to read them out, and if you want to be part of the podcast, it's the best way of doing that, unless you want to come on. And if I think your film cred's up to it, I'm sure we'd let you come on as well.
Absolutely. And also, one last place you can listen to us is on YouTube. So if you're not into the whole podcast revolution, then get thee to YouTube, still Untitled Film Podcast, and you can listen to us there. Hi, Mum.
Absolutely. So that takes us on to the news, Callum. And do you want to go first, or shall I?
You can go first.
Okay, I'm going to go with let's do the rogue bit of news first. So my rogue bit of news is more media than it is film, although arguably he has done some documentary films over the years. Tucker Carlson has been fired from Fox News.
No. I'm just imagining the green M&Ms stepping on his throat.
The masturbator-in-chief is gone. It seems probable that it was due to some sexual harassment lawsuits, but it's not official yet. And
nothing's confirmed.
It came from Daddy Rupert, pulled the gun out and shot him in the head. What I quite enjoyed, the last segment he ever did on Fox News, was him eating pizza with a guy and talking about his documentary about eating bugs. That he was like, now go and watch our documentary about eating bugs. He was just about to do a documentary about how America should go and take Canada back from its extreme liberal government as well, was the thing he was going to do. So that will never see the light of day, thank God. Yeah, so he is gone. He is dead. It means he has been fired by all three of the major US news networks. He's been fired by CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News now. So expect Newsmax or some shithole right-wing conspiracy hole will probably hire him, if any of them have any money back, because it also seems like they are going to all be sued out of existence by various voting machine companies, as Fox has recently had to pay nearly $800 million to a company called Dominion, and there apparently are a couple of bigger lawsuits going their way, and Newsmax and whatever. There's another arsehole network, and I can't think what they're called. But anyway, but yeah, apparently Rupert was scared of another lawsuit after the Roger Ailes ones, and then all of the what's his name, the shouty one. I've forgotten his name anyway.
It could be Bill
O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. And obviously this Dominion lawsuit. I suppose there's only so much money Fox could afford to pay in hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits. So fuck them all.
It's what she deserves.
Exactly. So that was my piece of news. It's slightly off topic, but I was very gleeful to see that.
Well, if no one else will take him, GB News will have him. So
that is true.
My first bit of news is a little bit of a sad one. This only came in today. Harry Belafonte has died.
I saw that, yeah.
At the age of 96, the actor and singer. He was one of the, big breakout black movie stars of the 50s and 60s, at a time when that was not something that you'd see it very rarely. Him and Sidney Poitier were contemporaries. He marched on Washington with Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was in many of the highest-grossing films of the 50s and 60s. And more recently, you could see him in Black Klansman. It's that very powerful and mournful moment. Towards the latter end of the film, he gives a speech about how he saw a horrible murder of a friend of his, and it really is a very powerful moment, and leads to the Black Power chanting in that movie, which corresponds to the more evil white power chanting. It's a very clever bit of filmmaking. I think that was his last film, but a legacy, and of course as a singer. Although we won't focus on that quite so much, his legacy reaches far, far, far beyond, the achievements of most people in their lives. The kinds of songs that he's had, the hits that he's had, the hit movies that he's had. It's a very sad thing to happen, but he died at a ripe old age, so that's something, and he'll be very missed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my second piece of news is a trailer dropped today for The Equalizer 3.
I saw that.
Who knew they were going to do a third one? I quite liked the first one.
Yeah, me too.
I thought it was good fun, much better than expected. Because obviously they're a remake of like a 70s or 80s kind of
Yes, it was
series.
an Edward Woodward.
Yeah.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Edward Woodward. Edward Woodward.
Don't
Edward Woodward.
literally try it.
I did it. It was
It's
fine.
it's a bit of fluff.
Wow. You need to be clearer with your fluff. It needs to be funnier.
Yes, I guess so.
Anyway. Yeah, so I didn't think I saw Equalizer 2. Maybe I did. I can't remember. I feel like maybe I did, and it was quite forgettable.
If I did, I can't remember it.
Well, yeah, quite. So interesting, there's an Equalizer 3 coming out. I almost feel like it's a bit like it's Denzel's Taken. I feel like it's kind of, it's a nice little paycheck where people, the first one got pretty good reviews and seems to chug along, and
all these old boys want to have an action franchise. In fact, Colin Farrell said in an interview recently that he asked his agent, and his agent asked him, what do you want to do next? And said, I wouldn't mind a John Wick. So I think a lot of actors who are 50 plus are going to their agents and going, I think it's time to get my own old man does action franchise.
Yeah, I think Taken started it, didn't it? And then obviously John Wick, and then Equalizer seems to be coming in to be one. Obviously, I think I'm right in saying they might be doing a Nobody 2 as well. Nobody with
yes, with Bob Odenkirk. I think that's true.
I think I saw that there's a second one, which is interesting. So yeah, there seems to be a running thing that people seem to like, and they seem to be making lots of.
Yes, old boys doing action.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicolas Cage just needs one now.
Speaking of old boys doing action, my second bit of news, Arnold Schwarzenegger set for movie return in action pick Breakout from Expendables 4 director, who knew there was going to be an Expendables 4. It's the first time hearing about it.
It must be out, isn't it? If he's already directed it, that seems to be what you're saying.
Well, this new film, Breakout, isn't yet, but Expendables 4, I think, is just around the corner.
Is it not even out yet?
Not even out. No, I think it's sometime in a little bit.
I saw the first one. I thought that was all the Expendables I ever need to see.
Yeah. So he's back. He takes long breaks, partly because for a while he was doing politics, and then just the fact that he was kind of getting on in years, and he doesn't have to do a movie unless he kind of wants to. Like, he probably is at the point in his career when he gets a bit bored and goes, I fancy doing a movie. And I think he's also got a Netflix TV show coming out. So he seems to be in one of those moods again. So this is going to be directed by Scott Woe, Expendables 4 filmmaker. And it's about a guy called Terry Reynolds. When his stepson is framed and sentenced to 25 years in a foreign country, Reynolds makes a daring jailbreak to save him and must overcome an overzealous prison warden in a race against time to avoid capture and flee the country. Sounds very generic, but, if it's fun, it could be on the funner side of generic.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought from the director of Expendables 4, generic sounds like probably the word.
Yeah. At best, meat and potatoes.
Which Expendables was it that he cameoed in? Because he turns up for one scene, doesn't he?
Does. It's Expendables. In Expendables 1, he's in one scene. In Expendables 2, he's in a fair bit. And in Expendables 3, he comes up and says, "Hello." Goodbye.
I don't think I ever saw Expendables 2. I feel like
It's ironically,
I think
it's
one
the,
was
it's
the
the
only one I've
best
seen.
one, which is like saying nothing at all because it doesn't mean it's that good.
Yeah, fair enough. Excellent. Well, that is the news. And we've got some movies to review now, I would think, probably.
We do indeed.
And what movies and why what are we doing this week, Callum? Tell the audience.
So
fill them in.
The new movie that we're going to be doing is Empire of Light, which is the Sam Mendes film. And it was shot very close to us. So we're in Folkestone in Kent, which is just a stone's throw away from where it was filmed in Margate, although little bits of it were filmed across Kent and other parts of England. And we're doing a nostalgic cinema themed week because we're going to be pairing it with the art house classic Cinema Paradiso, which is from the early 90s.
I noticed a question on the classic word.
There was many question marks there, which is the big foreign film of the early 90s. It lives in a similar reputation as something like Life is Beautiful or Amelie, but we'll get into that a bit later. So kicking us off with, I almost call it Save the Cinema, which we reviewed about 6 or so months ago.
Slightly better than that.
So let's kick off with Empire of Light. Do you want to take the honours?
Yeah, let's do it. So I think I do want to do a little bit of background. So it is filmed very locally to us, which was quite interesting to see. One of the things that I quite enjoyed about it, which it won't translate to anyone who's not living, I don't know, within like a 50-mile radius of us, is that it was kind of, I quite liked seeing all the locations. And actually, I've always thought of Margate as quite a cinematic place. I've always quite liked seaside towns that are a little bit decrepit, and Margate certainly is that, and has been, I think, since its heyday, after its heyday in the 60s. And they also, the cinema that it's kind of based in, although I would say based in a loose term, because they used what was the old cinema building, which we used to go and see movies in, and it's quite interesting actually. There's a part quite early on in the film where they're like, where the new character or the new person starts at the cinema, and they're taking, she's taking him around and showing him the cinema, and they go up these stairs into this section that the public aren't allowed in, and it's a whole other cinema, and they're like, oh, there used to be 2 more screens here. It was a whole other cinema upstairs. And actually, you and me used to go and watch movies up in that bit when they're walking through. There's this very famous, I think it's quite famous because it's architecturally, the building is actually quite famous. And there's this kind of like round desk where I remember used to go and buy tickets from, and they have this big like chandelier in it and stuff. So that I kind of found very, very interesting. And it was interesting how they shot it all as well, because what they did was there's this big area in Margate where there used to be a building that burnt down, and there's a big gap. And they basically built a whole soundstage in a giant tent there, and then built a fake cinema frontage as well. And I know quite a few people who were extras in it, and they said it was really surreal just walking in this kind of fake frontage of a cinema, and then walking into this soundstage, and then they're just suddenly inside a giant soundstage that's a cinema, which is quite surreal. So that's the background, anyway. You know, it's good. I think it's good to know that context, because I think it will paint our reviews slightly differently to how we review most films. Certainly, if it will for me. But basically, the story is about Olivia Colman's character, is it Sally? Is her name? Hillary. She is a assistant manager at a cinema, and at that cinema there is a whole bunch of characters. She is having an affair with the manager of the cinema, who is married, hence an affair. You tend to have to be in some form of relationship to have an affair.
Sorry, what's an affair?
Well, what happens is when there's 2 people who are together for a long period of time, and then one of those people is secretly seeing someone who's not in that, if that makes sense.
I think we've killed this joke.
Well, that's what I like to do. I like to drag them. I'm like Stuart Lee. I just like to drag them out. We'll bring this joke back at some point.
I'm sure
in
we
about
will.
half an hour's time. And then this new young lad comes and starts at the cinema, and they seem to have a spark right away. That's the synopsis.
That's
really.
a pretty good synopsis. So if there's a major malfunction with this movie, it's that it's not a movie, it's 4 movies, none of which it commits to. And by doing so, it sketches over any sort of nugget of interesting drama that could possibly come out, doesn't get explored to its fullest. So it kind of becomes a master of none. It doesn't commit to any of its big ideas. So as you mentioned, Olivia Colman plays Hillary, and very early on in the movie, it's shown that she has schizophrenia, and she visits a doctor who's very condescending. She goes to work, goes through the motions, but people are kind of very wary around her. And it's okay for a jumping off point, okay, but it becomes a case of, okay, I want more though. And it never really commits to more. It's just every so often when the film kind of bothers to remember, it will have her freak out and get into a rage. But it really is a case of when the film bothers to remember. And we've also got a coming-of-age film. This young lad, played by Michael Ward, who plays Stephen. He's a young black man. And, of course, films like that, set in the 1980s, as this film is, a story about a young black man in 1980s Britain. So
Thatcher.
Yeah, exactly. It does that kind of thing, but it sketches over racism. Again, when it bothers to remember, it has him being attacked by a bunch of skinheads. But it's like every 20 minutes, it goes, oh, snap. This film is supposed to be about racism, isn't it? Let's have him get beat up, which I'm sure he means well, Sam Mendes, but that's very much a heavy-handed, ham-fisted, white person writes about racism sort of thing. Like, there's no microaggressions. There's no, instances where people talk about wanting to touch his hair or kind of use slightly insulting language, but in that kind of cutesy, backhanded way that British people often do. It's always very aggressive. He's either getting beaten up or there's someone saying, you people. And it's like, it's always goes for kind of the 11 out of 10 major, and then it completely forgets about it. It's also a film about nostalgic cinema. You got this character played by Toby Jones, who's the projectionist, and he talks in very folksy, like, cinema is like life, it is. And, and we're going to be talking about this later, but those bits are very much biting off the apple of Cinema Paradiso. When it bothers to remember that it's being a film about a cutesy, folksy film about the nostalgia of cinema, it has the young lad, Michael, getting taught by Toby Jones, projectionist, about cinema is like a way of life. Let me show you how the projection booth works. Like, okay, commit to that. But it doesn't. And that's its big problem, is that any of these ideas would have made one good movie, but he wants to make 5 good movies and he ends up making one pretty bad movie. What do you think?
I would agree. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. It doesn't really do any of the movies very well, and it almost feels like all of the actors are acting in a different movie. Like Olivia Colman's, say, at an 11, and then Michael Ward's at a 7, just acting like a normal person, and then Colin Firth is like some weird, is at like 39 at like some massive surreal caricature,
play a pantomime villain.
It's such a small role as well. He's in like 3 scenes.
Yeah.
And then you got Toby Jones being Toby Jones, just kind of in the background occasionally, literally for like 3 scenes, and has no real, and none of the stories seem to connect together that well. And I kind of think what it should have done, and the film that I would have liked to watch, mainly because Michael Ward was so good, was it probably should have been a film about him and race. And in the film, he wants to become an architect, but maybe it should be about him wanting to become a director or something. And then the Toby Jones character, could G him on or whatever. And that would have been a more focused, better movie, although then it would have been a Cinema Paradiso clone. And the other thing is, I think the writing team behind it, realistically, couldn't write. You'd want a different director and a different writing team, really, if you're going to be telling a story about a young black man in 1980s.
Yeah,
you probably need someone who's lived those experiences to be able to do that.
Or someone who's researched it to the kind of nth degree.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it would be the wrong people to make that movie. So then, okay, maybe they should have made the Olivia Colman movie, which was the story about, mental health and how badly that was, how bad the mental health was treated in the in the 80s, this whole kind of thing like, yeah, lithium's really good, yeah, because that's what lithium's known for, making people like completely numb and just destroying their lives. That's what lithium's known for. So that could have been an interesting movie as well. And apparently, that reading some interviews at the time when the movie came out, Sam Mendes, their character's slightly based on Sam Mendes' mother. So she had some mental health issues, I believe, and that was kind of, it's kind of based upon that, which maybe makes more sense. But yeah, it was a complete and utter mess. Now, there are some bits of the film that work. The main things being the cinematography. It's Roger Deakins, who is a fantastic cinematographer, and Margate looks, nice. It kind of works for it. It doesn't actually state that it's in Margate, the film, but it's in Kent. They're pretty hammer that point home quite a few times, name drop various places in Kent and things. But yeah, so that, I think that's it. I think it's just a massive mess of a film, and they should have picked a lane, and probably, ideally, picked the lane with Michael Ward because he was the best actor in it. So that's what I was going to say. The things that I liked about it, the cinematography, I thought the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross soundtrack, why not one of their best, worked fine for it. And I enjoyed Michael Ward's acting. And I enjoyed Toby Jones in his tiny little scenes. But outside of that, I just felt everyone else didn't really get the tone of the movie. I don't think the script got the tone of the movie and needed to pick a lane. And yeah, just overall, it's a bit of a mess.
And apparently it was written during lockdown, and it feels like a lockdown movie. It's like...
I missed the cinema.
Yeah, I missed the cinema. But considering it was a lockdown movie written about his mum, it all feels very hollow. Like... Sam Mendes has had various films of various successes, from the kind of highest Oscar winning to films that have kind of gone under the radar, nobody's really cared, like this one. If it's more comparable to anything, he made a film about 10 or so years ago called Away We Go with John Krasinski and Maya Rudolph. But whereas this film sort of feels kind of a bit dead, for a film that's so personal, it feels like it doesn't really feel that personal. It feels quite overwrought and like awards baiting. Something like Away We Go, a mess though that was too, that felt somehow more timely and personal in where Sam Mendes was in his life at that moment. And it's just a shame to see this movie just kind of not being very present. It feels both old-fashioned, but also, despite the great cinematography, televisual, and it all feels... ham-fisted, and although I'm sure it was personalized, he was writing it, and it's the first film he's written on his own without another screenwriter. While it does feel personal in one way, it doesn't transcend, it doesn't lend itself to the film. When it gets to the film, it just sort of feels like this could be any nostalgic cinema trip.
I think it feels a bit like he was given all the ingredients and then shut the bed on the script. Realistically, I think that's the issue with it. And without having, as much as it's nice to look at something pretty, if the script's not there, then it's completely pointless. I mean, I've got to the stage where I really hate ugly films. I hate things with too much CGI, and I absolutely adore well shot things. But if that's the only thing you're enjoying about a movie, then there's something wrong with it. And I frankly think it was boring. And I think if you'd picked the lane and cut out one of the movies and made it 90 minutes and made it look that pretty, and actually, concentrated and made a good job of the lane you picked, then it would have been a good movie. But it just swerved around so much tonally, from style of acting, and then no story felt anywhere near complete. Like the Toby Jones's character, other than him saying, "I like films a lot, films are good, and it's just the light dancing through the sky," and then Olivia Colman's character, she doesn't really get much closure or an ending, and I just don't think the race stuff just kind of comes and goes. It just nothing really. There's no one. Do you think was there any major character development? Do you really think that their lives have moved on massively? I suppose maybe the young lad, but it just doesn't work on so many levels.
No, it really doesn't, and it's a shame because I think for us personally, we saw
really
this film
wanted to like it.
We saw this film being made. We saw the outside of the cinema set, and every so often the films outside would change from The Long Good Friday, Blues Brothers, a whole bunch of films. I think Arthur was one of them. Lots of films from the early 80s. And it's like, oh, great, this is going to be really good. And then it's not.
Yeah, I was hoping it'd be a bit of a nostalgia trip for myself, but it wasn't. So
yeah,
sad times.
Yeah, sad times.
But I think that probably brings us to the end of that review.
I think so. I think that wraps her all up.
So it is time for an advertisement break. And I'm going to turn Callum's microphone off if he says I'll buy that for $1 when we come back. Hello. And
no.
I'll kill you. I'm in the same room. I can do it this time.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Anyway, welcome back, everybody. We are now going to be talking about the 1988 classic movie, Cinema Paradiso. So, Callum, tell us about Cinema Paradiso.
Well, if you've seen one art house film in your life, it may very well have been this one, because this was one of the biggies. This is like the thing that came over to Hollywood and went down an absolute storm. It's one of the few, like every so often there's one film that just does it. And this is that. So it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. It won the Academy Award. It was nominated for several BAFTAs, and it won for Best Actor and Best Foreign Language Film. And it's concerns a man called Salvatore. It's an Italian film. It's in 1988, Rome. He gets home after a late night of, he's a filmmaker, he's very successful, and his girlfriend, or at least the woman that he's sleeping with at that moment, tells him, "Oh, I got a call from your mother. She's told me that Alfredo has died. Does that name mean anything to you?" And he says, "Oh, go to sleep. It's okay." And then he starts reminiscing about the times when he was a young lad, just after the Second World War. He's an 8-year-old boy, precocious young lad. And he and this Alfredo spark up a friendship. He is the projectionist at the local cinema in his little Sicilian town. And he teaches him about kind of everything about how the cinema works and the love of film. And, this young lad, he is just absolutely smitten with cinema. And, he tries to make excuses to go there all the time. He disobeys his mother in order to go to the cinema. And then the story starts playing out over several different timelines. So it jumps from being a young lad to the life of the teenager, when he's starting to get a bit more rebellious and a bit more interested in girls. And then it jumps ahead to him as an older man who's successful, coming back to the town after the funeral of Alfredo, and all the kind of reminiscing and the guilt that he has about not coming back sooner to this small Sicilian town to not see Alfredo and his mother again. So it's about that strong bond, that strong friendship. So, Johnny, this is art, okay? I don't want to hear any of your, it's all right. This is smarty pants arty art house. And it's the one film where you're allowed to say that, because other foreign films go down like a sack of wet bricks or something in Hollywood. This is the one they've accepted, okay? What did you think?
It's all right.
Yeah.
I actually want to add into your first bit that you've missed something, quite a crucial point of what I think is quite a crucial point of the movie, is that they strike up a friendship initially over the local priest. Censors all of the movies.
Yes, he censors all of the kissing scenes. Every so often he goes, "No!" and
rings a little bell
and removes the little kissing
which is
scene.
quite an important plot point later in the movie.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's why they first met. I think he's with the little boy is with the priest.
He's doing some work for me. So he's
and that's
ringing
how
the bells in order to
do the communion. So that's how he becomes friends with the priest. Brings him along this time when he's going to go and cut these kissing scenes out. And that's how he becomes friends with Alfonso. Anyway, it's all right. It's better than Empire of Light.
Yes, it is.
It's very nostalgic. It's very sweet. I think what I'd like to preface here, it's way too long, but I think what I'd like to preface is, so it came out in 1988 in Italy and wasn't that successful. And then in 1989, they recut it and showed it, I think, at Cannes, and then particularly in the UK, and it did really well, and people suddenly really liked it. And I think that cut is an hour and 24 minutes long. I think it's 84 minutes long, or thereabouts. It's a lot shorter. It might be 94. But then the version that we watched, which was, I think the version I watched was 2 hours and 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think the same.
So what happened was when they re-released it again in, say, 1995, on the first time on video or DVD or whatever, they did it they almost did it closer to the original cut. And everything I can see about it online, people seem to suggest the hour and a half cut is much, much better than this 2 hour cut. And I think maybe that's where I've got an issue. I think the pacing's wrong at times. I think it feels flabby. Maybe if it was 90 minutes, there or thereabouts, it would have felt a lot tighter and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I just think because it was this longer version of the film, it felt flabby and slow paced and boring. Frankly, I was bored at times. I was like, look, it's nice that this old guy taught him to love cinema, and a few interesting things here and there happened in his life. But there was so many scenes of just like the locals watching films and stuff that just didn't need to be in there, or like long shots of someone cycling down a hill, which was all very pretty but incredibly unneeded. My guess is that that's the kind of thing that was maybe chopped out on the 90-minute version, and that would have probably been a lot better film, because it's a nice story and it's nicely told and it's well shot and pretty beautiful, and it does make you. I mean, I'm not particularly nostalgic for having grown up in a 1950s Sicilian village, because I didn't. But that kind of visual is very pretty.
Not?
No, I didn't. No. It's not something that's in my lived experiences. But I can get it. Yeah, I can maybe see where that comes from. I think overall it's a nice little cutesy movie, but it is a little bit like baby's first art house movie, a little bit in the lines of like Amelie and things, which again, perfectly good movie, but it's not exactly like, I don't know, the most out there kind of. It's not Another Round or something where it's like, deep cut, but no, it's fine. And I think probably that original cut I would have enjoyed a lot more, but I did find it a bit slow paced and boring and flabby at times. What did you think?
Pretty much the same. The amazing thing is that this isn't even the longest cut. The kind of one of the original ones is something like 3 hours long, which I think is because when I texted you yesterday, the one I looked on, I think it was IMDb first or somewhere, and it said, "How long is this film?" It said 3 hours long. I said, "Oh my god, it's going to be such a slog," and then found out that it was 2 hours. It wasn't so bad.
Yeah, I think if it was 3 hours, I would have pulled the plug and said, let's not watch this movie.
But the reason, I mean, you're right. 90 minutes would have been a lot better time, because there is a preconception or a misconception that if a film is in a foreign language, it's better simply for existing. Mm-hmm. And what people don't realize is that all films are just a collection of tropes and genres kind of mixed up together. They're influenced, of course, by their own community and their own country and their own culture. But this is just a coming-of-age film, and it's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good coming-of-age film.
Yeah, it's Kes.
It's Kes. It's Stand By Me. It's, you name a...
Billy Elliot.
Yeah, exactly. Name a good coming-of-age film, and this is it.
I almost started my review with, this is cinema althood, because it's a bit like kid althood in the kind of way it goes through time.
Clever. And another issue is that when people think back about this film and their warm recollections, they're thinking of individual scenes, which are very well executed. So one of the most memorable scenes is when he turns the projector around after the cinema has been closed and plays the film out of the window onto someone's house. And it's an incredibly sweet moment, and it comes just before a very dramatic moment when something quite tragic happens. And I know we can spoil older movies, but I think better not. Keep that under wraps a little bit if you want to see it. Or the scene at the end, because like we mentioned, one of the big moments is cutting out all of these kissing scenes, and there's something that happens at the end involving those. And again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it is a collection of moments rather than a film. And if it has another issue, is that while it is a pretty good coming of age film, it's not a very dynamic one. Like, mentioning Billy Elliot, in Billy Elliot, it's set against the backdrop of the miners' strike. And, there's very harrowing moments where he's at the bottom of the hill and he sees all the police at the top. There's some little interest because this is just after the Second World War. So there's, his dad is missing or presumed dead. Presumed dead, and at one point he finds out that he is dead. After a little bit, they find out that he's dead, and that's a little moment. It's not really a lot of meat, though, and I think that's the problem. I think if this film did work for me, it's that I really like the final act when he's an older man, a successful man. Because towards the end, at the end of the teenage story, Alfredo says, "Go away from here, away from this small town. Don't ever come back. Don't ever come back. You hear me?
Pursue your dreams.
Pursue your dreams." And it's so cheesy. But I really liked this sort of regretful version of Salvatore at the end in the third act. I thought that was played very subtly, and for a film that was so overwrought and cheesy, and it is incredibly overwrought and cheesy, to have a little bit of more mournful tone at the end, I think that really worked. That really pulled me back a bit when I was starting to get a bit bored, frankly. And each act should have been half an hour long. And I think the last act, as an older man, that was the shortest one. I think it was about half an hour. They all should have been that same length.
Yeah, I think if it was 30 minutes, it would have felt tighter. And maybe 5 minutes for the opening scene.
Yeah, because that first bit when he's a kid was I thought it would never end at some point, except for the couple of moments where it's like, oh, that's a sweet moment. He's playing it out the window, and that's
the kid actor was pretty good as well.
And he's a precocious little scamp. I don't
usually like kid actors, and he was pretty good.
So yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's more Walt Disney than it is, Antonioni. This is not Italian realism. This isn't The Bicycle Thief or something like this. It's Walt Disney with foreign accent, with foreign language. And that's probably exactly why it did so well in Hollywood as the Hollywoods. This is the art house film you've got to see. God damn it, this is important. This is art. Thing is, I don't mind Walt Disney when it's done right. And when it does it right, the moments that work right, they hit. It's just that they are moments rather than a movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a strange one. It is reasonable. It's fine. But it like you said, I think that whole thing. I think people go, it's in a foreign language. It must be genius. Mm-hmm. Although forgetting that every movie is in a foreign language to somebody. But yeah, it's fine. It's if that had come out in the UK, I reckon it would have been, that it's not going to be the full Monty, put it that way. It's not going to be like or Kes or something people are going to really, or Billy Elliot, people are going to really remember. It's going to be one of those ones that comes out and quite a few people around the age of about 50 to 70 go and see it at the cinema on a Sunday afternoon. Some of them might have a Prosecco, some of them have a cup of tea with it, and then it would have been
I think that's the audience for The Empire of Light.
Yeah, well, quite. Well, they didn't see it. That was the audience The Empire of Light was meant to be for. And then they'd all come out and go, oh, I saw that film the other day. It was really nice. That young lad was really good at acting, he was. And then it would be occasionally on TV, probably in like December 13th, every 3 years, and then that's it, and that's all it would live on. But because it was, I think because it had this story behind it where it didn't do well in Italy, and then it's like, with certain bands like Jimi Hendrix, it's like, oh, people didn't like Jimi Hendrix, and then he came to England and people liked Jimi Hendrix, so England's got really good taste and it finds these. I always think there's a bit of that in there as well, probably. So yeah, I don't think it quite lives up to its reputation, but it's fine. It's serviceable. And I think if I had the 90-minute cut, I'd probably enjoy it more. Yeah, agreed. I think that everything about it it needed to play more into the tropes that it was already kind of quite slavish to. So, you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't make a film which is basically just, and I do mean just, a coming-of-age film, and frankly not a particularly interesting one, and then kind of try and give it some self-importance of like, no, this is serious art. I'm going to make it 3 hours. Okay, nobody wanted to see that. 2.5 hours, and nobody wants to see that. 2 hours? Okay, that's done pretty well.
Let's also put an hour and a half cut as well. Hey, this film it seems to be at odds with its own genre. And I know that these films are written personally, and I've read that the director wrote it a lot about his actual small town. And I know these films can be quite personal, a lot like Empire of Lights, with Sam Mendes writing about his mum. The problem is that we're not Sam Mendes or the director of this film's friends, so we're not that interested in their time when they sit you down and talk about how there was this old cinema. Really, he's talking about the old cinema again. Okay, strap in, it's going to be a long one. Right for the film the audience that you actually want. Although I guess this film, we're kind of outliers in this case because a lot of people love this film. 49th best film according to IMDb, but
that list is the biggest pile of bull. People should not be allowed. General public should not be allowed to vote on those film lists because they just get little stupid. Chris Nolan films are not that good. They're fine.
Yeah.
Maybe if one or two, maybe if Inception or one or two of his movies, Memento, were like 97th, I think fair enough. But his whole output of movies does not deserve to be in the top 100 of the IMDb list.
No, not at all.
And not in like 6th place, 9th place and things. He's at best fine. Anyway, that's my Chris Nolan. So that's off topic.
Both of these films are very personal, but they're written for people who know the filmmakers, and they should be written for the audiences. And
at 90 minutes, maybe it would have been.
Yes, quite. And if Cinema Paradiso has one up on Empire of Light, is that it has one story and it sticks to it. It is the story of the old projectionist taking on the young boy, which should have been, maybe the story that Empire of Light was.
Yeah, exactly. With maybe the race stuff thrown in if it was done properly by the right people. Yeah, I would agree on that. So, I think that probably wraps the review up. What are your scores on the doors and thoughts of Empire of Light? Give us a wrap up.
Well, Empire of Light is very disappointing. For a filmmaker I like, and it was shot locally, I was looking forward to it, and then it ends up being 5 mini movies that have no connective tissue, all of which are sketchy and jumped over. So it's going to be a 4 out of 10. It's got some pretty cinematography, a couple, the odd good performance. Nothing. If it's not lower, it's only because nothing about it made me angry, and it's only where I get angry that I reserve for the 3s, the 2s, the 1s. So 4 out of 10 because I'm not going to remember it after talking about it.
Yeah, it's just a mess. It looks good, and like you say, it's got a couple of good performances in it. But outside of that, it's a mess. It doesn't know what it is, and the script's not that good. And I found myself, particularly, I think it got a bit more pace up in the second half, but the first half was just, I found boring. I struggled. I actually watched the first half and then paused it for about 3 hours before I could muster up the strength to go back and watch the second half. And had to drink a few glasses of wine in the middle. So yeah, I was just like, okay. And yeah, it didn't make me angry. Like nothing pissed me off in it, really. Well, one thing pissed me off in it, but not about the movie, about certain people in the world. So yeah, no, I actually was thinking 4 as well. I think, it gets a couple of points for its cinematography, a couple of points for the acting, and it doesn't deserve to be a 3 or a 2 because I don't hate it, but it just doesn't work. But yeah, Cinema Paradiso, thoughts?
So this is what I like to call a YouTube movie because it's a collection of moments, and the moments work really well. So it's the kind of film where you'll go back on YouTube to watch the projectionist putting the film onto the wall outside, or the moment with the film kisses. But it is a collection of moments rather than a movie. If there's something that saves it a bit, it is, I think, that the subtlety of the last act and the mournfulness of the last act. I actually found myself being quite moved by that last act when a lot of what came before was actually quite boring. But, it doesn't do anything. It's not egregiously poor or anything. And the moments that are worth seeing are really worth seeing. You can understand why in its Walt Disney-esque sweetness that it was such a big hit. It is a Walt Disney style or mid-90s Miramax style version of an art house film, a version of a foreign film. And, there's a few moments that bring it round. So I think a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, fair enough. I can only review the film that's put in front of me, and I think maybe it would have been slightly higher, my score, if it was the 90-minute cut. But yeah, the first act, although it was needed to set the film up, I found it a bit boring. The middle act was a bit more interesting, but not massively interesting. And then, like you say, the third act was very good. It was well shot. It was, fairly well written. It was fairly heartwarming. It was, I think, I can't really fault any of the acting. I thought all the acting, I think it was all very well cast and put together. So from that point of view, it works. So yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 7, which is a little bit nicer. But proviso of that, I might have given a 90-minute cut an 8. I think, not knowing what they've cut, but I would assume, I think if it was a 90-minute movie, I'd have liked it a bit more. And obviously that's pretty good. Obviously, it's held as a classic and a masterpiece and had won 5 BAFTAs and things. Do I think it's in that realm? I personally don't. I think normally those kind of films are the ones we're giving 9s and 10s to, not 7s and 8s. So yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 7. I think that's a fair score. So that means we have both given Empire of Light a 4 out of 10, and between us, Cinema Paradiso had a 6.5 out of 10. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Untitled Film Podcast. Please don't forget to go and like and subscribe to us on the YouTubes, the Instagrams and the Facebooks. And please interact with us as we do like it. Bye-bye.
Bye. Don't come back to this town. Don't come back.
But please come back to the podcast.